We're going to take some time out and go over goal setting. And, some people look at it lightly, but I tell you, if you really do an in-depth study of it, it'll change your life. And I'm just going to share with you, we're actually going to do a deep dive. This is not going to be superficial. We're going to go into a lot of the psychology, essentially why we succeed or fail in life, specifically how to overcome. How to overcome. What are some basic principles that we've learned about human nature to understand failure and how to overcome? That's really what we're doing here. That's the goal setting. So we're going to go into a lot of psychology. So I want you to be aware of that right off the bat. If you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing or not doing what you're doing, your chances of changing it are little to none. So, it was really coming to an understanding, studying. And what I did is I just studied behavior. And that's how I was able to just do just keep elevating my lifestyle. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about increasing your quality of lifestyle. And I'm going to share with you a lot of personal stories, a lot of examples of, I've had a lot of experience with doctors and things like that to kind of bring it home. And maybe, I might be touching on some very raw points relative to you that you might not even be aware of. And that's what happened with me. And so I gained a greater understanding of my strengths and weaknesses and why I was doing what I doing or not doing what I doing. And more importantly, I was able to harness it. I was able to harness it and move it in a particular direction that I wanted to go. And unfortunately, that's not the case with most people. Most people are reactive to life. They're not proactive to life. And I'll give you an example, and I'll use one of my friends. I was going to pick up some concert tickets in his area in 6 months. And I texted him, I said, hey, do you want to go to the concert? I'll pick up the tickets. And he texts back and says, you kidding? That's too far away. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm like, and I texted him back. I said, that's the difference. That's the difference between you and me. I'm going to be proactive and I'm going to do it, put it on the calendar and do it. And he'll just wait for things to happen where eventually something else will sidetrack him and get on his calendar where he won't even do it. And this plays out in life. It plays out over and over and over again. So again, it's about you taking control of your life, your lifestyle, security for your family. That's really what we're talking about. And increasing the quality of your lifestyle. And I can't tell you, I never would have imagined that I would have lived the life that I've lived up to this point in time. Never, ever. And it was because of everything I'm getting ready to go over with you. This is what has allowed me to just live an unbelievable, phenomenal life from where I started. There's no way from where I started that I ever should have gotten to where I've gotten. And this is what did it. I'm going to be covering the steps that did it. Okay. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. So let me just share with you some of the results that happened with me as a result of learning this and applying it. So again, I've opened 77 chiropractic offices in 20 states, and I did that within 9 years. So we opened 7 offices. Eventually, we opened 7 offices every 6 months. We averaged over 600,000 patient visits annually. Gross collections were about 100 million annually. Now, did I ever desire that when I got out of chiropractic college? No. Was it ever in my wildest dreams? No. And that's part of this goal setting understanding that we're going to be getting into. So we had over 300 employees. I was able to retire at age 33. My net worth went over $1 million when I was 32 years old. I was able to retire at age 33 with a 6-figure passive income. And of course, my plan was to take the summer off and kind of retire for the summer. It was all fun and dandy, and living on my yacht. It was all fun and dandy for about a week, and then it was boring as hell. And I said, I'll never do this again. So I practiced full time for only 7 years. So when I went to chiropractic college, did I think I was only going to practice 7 years and be done? No. I had a private limousine as a result of all this. I had a 40-foot yacht that I lived on in the summertime. I had a second home in Florida where I vacationed in Naples, Florida, the highest density of millionaires. I had 2 full-time associate doctors in my practice. So I didn't even have to practice. I just managed, put the systems in place, and I was able to travel the world. At age 33, I was able to travel the world. I've been to all over Europe. I've been to almost every country in South America, Central America, all the countries in Europe and the Baltic nations. Only places I haven't been is the Far East, and that's it. Speaker at 3 chiropractic colleges. Did I ever think that I'd be a featured speaker? That it was required attendance? All the seniors, it was required attendance to show up when I showed up to talk. I've donated over $500,000 to the chiropractic profession. I've authored 10 books now. I've got my scuba certification when I was, I don't know, she's 23 years old. Been scuba diving just around the world, seen some amazing things from great white shark diving to out, living on a liveaboard to the Galapagos Islands. So it's just, I got my private license, qualified for my private license. I also had a private plane. Did I ever think that I'd want a private plane? No. But these are the steps. No, obviously all this didn't happen at once. These were steps. And then I got my boats. I was qualified for my boat captain certification. I decided to do that a few years ago. And I started doing triathlons in my 50s. So these are just some of the examples of how what I'm getting ready to cover with you, how I use what I'm getting ready to cover you to do all these things, to really live just a lifestyle that I never would have thought I would have been able to live. It was never in my wildest dreams. So I took it pretty serious. I took goal setting and what I wanted in life and where I was going pretty serious. And then one thing led to another, and I just kept going in that direction. And it's unbelievable. I will say this. It is unbelievable how fast you can get from point A to point B when you actually apply these steps. And the reverse is the same. I found that when you don't apply these steps, nobody ever really, they stay stagnant. Most people are doing the same thing a year later. They're making the same income. They have the same assets, same lifestyle, same lack of freedoms year to year. And that's a shame. And that's typically the vast majority of the population. So let's go into some of these steps, and I'll share a lot of personal experiences with you also, and a lot of studying. So what I did is I studied success. That's what I did. I studied a lot of people. I've got a huge library, and the focus of my library is I studied successful people. I read a lot of biographies, a lot of successful people. I read a lot of biographies. I'm like, what happened? How did they become successful? What happened in their life? And it's pretty clear when you understand these steps why successful people are successful. And it is not an accident. And yes, you can replicate it. It's amazing. And self-help. I'm real big into self-help books. And so that's really, you look at my library, you'll see self-help books everywhere. You'll see autobiographies and biographies of successful people, and a little bit of history. That's what you'll see in I've got 7 bookcases, like these bookcases behind me. I've got actually 9. I've got 9 bookcases full of books, hundreds and hundreds of books. And my goal back in the days to read 1 book a week, a light book, and one intense book a month. So I went through a lot of material, a lot of seminars, books, seminars, tapes. Anyway, let's put it all together. So let's get moving on this. Okay, so, and some of this is just going to be common sense to you. Some of it's not. Some of it's going to be an aha moment. So let's break this down into, and I call it the 10 steps. And it's really to achieving your life's goal. That's what we're talking about. And it's more than your goal, because your goals will change, but it'll create a lifestyle that you never even envisioned, a higher quality lifestyle that you never even thought of. It's amazing how fast it's amazing how fast it can happen when these steps are applied. I was absolutely amazed at how fast I went from point A to point B when I applied these steps. It was like a rocket. So let me go ahead and share these with you. So number one, define with clarity what you want. That's number one. Most people do not even know what they want. They have a vague, nebulous idea, and that doesn't cut it. You've got to have it. Vague in general does not work, but most people never even define what they want in life in all of their different areas. And again, we're going to be focusing a lot more on materialism and income, but I'm talking about every area of life, being a better father, being a better wife, being a better husband, just all of these areas. Vague doesn't cut it. Vague does not cut it. The more specific, the higher the likelihood. So you got to know what the hell you want. And I'd say that's number one right out of the box. Most people do not even have clarity of what they want. And I can relate to this in so many ways. Before I learned this, I didn't have clarity. The only clarity I had is I thought, and this is true, I thought, man, I want to be a chiropractor. I love chiropractic. I had a personal experience with it. It fit with my belief system, my health, my ideas of health, natural health. And so my idea was to be a chiropractor. And that's like a lot of people, they go just, that, and then that's it. Fortunately, I didn't stop there, but that's all I wanted. I thought, man, if I could see 100 patient visits a week, make a 6-figure income, I would have it made the rest of my life. That's literally the ceiling that I put on myself. And it was one hell of a ceiling. So you can't do that, so, and that's one of the things a lot of times when people join my coaching, they'll join to do a little better. Next thing you know, 6 months, a year later, their whole thought process of what they can do with their business and their life has changed because their paradigm has changed. We opened so many doors that they didn't even see they could walk through. So this all becomes very important. So clarity includes when, where, how. So we're going to go into this in greater detail. So the very first thing you have to have is clarity. Even if you write down something vague and then it gets clearer and clearer. But it cannot be vague. I mean, it cannot be vague, period. Okay, large versus small goals. So we're going to pay attention to large versus small goals. And I always broke mine, and I'll just share with you what I did. So I'll share with you what I learned, what I did, and how it related to my experience the last 20, 30 years, and it evolved. So I always had short-term, medium, and long-term. When I started learning this, I had short-term, medium, and long-term. And to me, long-term was like 5 years and more. That was like a long-term. Short-term is in the next quarter, like next, I was breaking it up into quarters. And then medium was between, it was like a year, something like that, something you want happening in the next year. So I always had short, medium, and long term. Okay, so you might want to consider this, and some are bigger and smaller. It didn't matter the size of the goal. I applied the same technique. It didn't matter the size. Time frame of goals, short, moderate, long term. So I talked about that. So you have to have clarity. You want what kind of time frame are we talking about? And I'll just share with you when I did this, and this is another major concept. Goals should change with your life. My goals and my age are nowhere near what they were 30 years ago. I mean, I'm not even on the same page from 30 years ago. So you have to be aware that you're going to change where you're at mentally right now, and your vision, your paradigm, your limitations, your perceptions and beliefs, they're going to change. If anything, they'll just change with life. What you want in life, what you want when you're in the 30s is very different when you're in 50s. I get clients come to me in their 50s, and they're not interested in making a ton of money anymore. They're interested in freedom. They're like, how the hell am I going to get out of my office? And they'll gladly not make as much money to be able to get out of their office and start enjoying life. Where with the younger kids, the younger people, money's more important. They got to get on their feet. They got to buy their house. They want a nice car. They want a nice house, all that stuff. So it changes. So you have to be willing to let it change and acknowledge it change. And there's some goals that I didn't attain. There's some goals that I wrote down that I never attained. And then finally, it didn't matter to me anymore. That goal was irrelevant. It wasn't valuable to me anymore. See? Okay. Goals should change with age, success, maturity, education, and reasons. Why are you doing it? There's, good and bad reasons, right and wrong reasons, unfortunately. So you got to be willing to change. I didn't realize this until I read one of the nicest books that I read about life changes, and how every decade what you want changes. But it's even faster than that when you pursue it, when you actively pursue what you want in life instead of being reactive. And that's the big kicker, is limits and paradigm and being reactive. And that's when you'll stay stagnant, period. Okay, so that's number one. First, you got to decide what you want. Decide what you want. I know, and I'll use some of my analogies. Like I said, I wanted to make a six-figure income. Well, what happened after I made a six-figure income? I go, well, let's go ahead and make $250,000 a year. I went to the next level. I go, okay, well, let's make $250,000 a year. And then I go, well, what happened after I made $250,000? Then I go, well, let's do $500,000. Let's go after $500,000. I'm like, okay. And then what happened after I made $500,000? I'm like, well, I just went from $500,000 to $1 million. I go, well, let's just shoot for $1 million. See? So you've got to know what you want. You got to have a starting point. And realizing it may grow further, may not. Your values will change. What you want may change. And then your attention will change. I mean, what I know a lot of fathers, especially the chiropractors, they want to spend more time with their kids, especially when the kids are younger. And they can't, because they're in their office till 6 o'clock at night. They'll get home at 6:30, maybe even 7. So they miss a lot of their kids' games and activities, a lot of those things. Well, that's not going to be important when you don't have little kids and they're out of the house anymore. See? So the very first thing, and then I'll also share with you what I did. So I'll share with you what I did, and I'll share with you what I did with my doctors as I trained them. This was so important. So I had all my doctors, what I'm going through with you and getting ready to go through with you right now, I had all my doctors do. They were required to do it. They were required to do it. There wasn't any kind of, sort of, maybe. So they had to write down, all the doctors that I was training, open offices, they had to write down short-term, moderate, and long-term goals for where they at this point in their life. Okay. So that's number one. Decide on what you want. Over 90% of the people don't even decide what they want. Life happens. They're reacting to life as they're going through it. Don't do that. Decide what you want. If you want to go scuba diving, you want to get your pilot's license, you want to Ferrari, whatever it is you want, whatever it is, decide what you want based on your values at this present time. That's number one, period. And the more clarity, the better. And I would have short-term, quarterly, and then I'd have yearly, and then like say 5 years. That's what I did. And I just wrote it all down. We'll go through this. And I just decided, well, what is it that I want? What's valuable to me? What would increase the quality of my lifestyle that I would enjoy? And that's what I did. Okay. We just lost about 95% of the crowd right there. 95% of the people will not even do step one. They will not even write down. It's amazing how many people will not even identify what they want. Now, there's a difference between generalizing and dreaming. Oh, I'd like to live in a big house. That's not a goal. That's dreaming. Okay. Decide what you want. You decide on your future in each of the categories, whether it's spiritual, monetary, your home, your car, your social circle. You decide and not let it just be reactive. All right, let's go to number 2. Tie the goal to a higher calling, sense of duty. This becomes pretty important. We're now getting ready to go into some deep psychology. And if you never understand the human psychology, you'll essentially stay in a state of homeostasis all your life. What does that mean? You'll just be average. You'll just plateau and just kind of meander through life. And you never will have achieved way more than you could have, that your wildest dreams ever could have thought of. I see it all the time. I've got clients that come to me and, they're struggling with one practice, how to even be successful in practice. And 1 year, 2 years later, they got 2 practices, 3 practices, and 4 practices. Their whole paradigm shifted. And they just came to me to just learn how to be successful in one practice. Say, okay, so you've got to know the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is fun. This is a foundational principle in why you will and will not do things in life right here. And if you don't understand it, it naturally applies to you. And so when you understand it, then there's a formula to overcome it. And we'll go into these. We're going to go into all this right now. Okay, so what is Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, that was developed by Abraham Maslow in the 50s. And it's one of the, it's like the most well-known model of human motivation and nature. It's the most accepted. And basically breaks down the stages of where you're at in your life. One is survival. So the very bottom of life is survival. And so that's to attain your physiological needs: oxygen, food, shelter, sex. Your physiological needs, period. You don't have oxygen, nothing else matters. You don't care about the boat if you don't have shelter. You don't care about the limo or the yacht if you don't have food. So these are all primordial, prioritized. Okay, so survival. Doesn't take much motivation when you're in survival. That's a natural motivating place, survival. And everybody has a different idea of what survival is. There's some people that think if they live in a middle class neighborhood, they're in survival and they're struggling. And yet there's people that are living under the bridge, the homeless, they're not even worried. They're not in their mind, they're not even in survival. They're not even worried. See? So a lot of this is highly variable on your perception of reality. And that becomes very important when learning how to overcome your, and this is a big concept, is recognizing and knowing how to overcome your weaknesses. That's another major part of goals. So you go, so there's survival, security, that should say security. So security is emotional security, physical security. So after survival, after we have food and oxygen, shelter, now we look for some security in our relationships and our people and our environment. Okay, that's number two. Now those are pain-based motivators. Now this becomes very important later. Those are pain-based motivators. 80% of everything we do in life, every action that we do is going to be based on those two, 80% of them. Now, it depends where you are in life also, and we'll go into this as we go further on. Then there's socialization. And so after we have that kind of stability in our life, then we care about socialization. And then as we go into socialization, we care about materialization and then self-actualization. So socialization, materialism, and self-actualization, those are pleasure-based motivators. Now, this becomes very important because the majority of society has it wrong. The majority of society thinks that people do things, because they want to make a lot of money, or they want a big house, or they want an airplane or a yacht, and that's 97% wrong. That is not why I ended up with an airplane. That is not why I ended up with a limousine. That's not why I ended up with a second home in Florida. That's not why I ended up with a live aboard 40-foot yacht. And so we'll go into this. So the first two are pain-based motivators, and the last three, socialization, materialization, and self-actualization, are pleasure-based. So 80% of what we do is to get out of pain. In other words, secure our survival and our security. That's 80% of where we will spend our time, energy, and money. Okay. And it doesn't take a lot of motivation to do that, but some people have different perceptions of pain. Now, this is going to be real important when we get into self-understanding. So there's not black and white. Everybody's at this point in survival, and then everybody's at this point in security, and then no, everybody has a different perception of their idea of survival. And I'll be giving you some examples and the self-awareness. So you need to become self-aware relative to where you are. There's some people, like my friend, until I talked to him about this, I got one friend, he's got a very low sense of survival. I mean, things got to be really, really, really bad before he gets off his ass. Well, his perception of survival is just real low. When other people, they'll bust their butt and they'll keep fighting and pushing and challenging and they're way out of survival security. See, it's based about your perception and self-acknowledgement. This is going to become real important down the road here, and you'll see why in just a minute. Okay, so motivation level. So we go into motivation level. Everybody thinks money's the big motivator, and it's not. Money is one of the weakest motivators there are. And money is very important when you're in survival or security. Money is singular because that's what it'll create. That's what will take you out of survival and create security. So at that level in a life, money should be the focus. Get a job, create a business, make some money, pay for your food, pay for your shelter. Okay. But then it doesn't. Real quickly, the next level of motivation is personal gain. Some people want status. That's a big, keeping up with the Joneses. Why does somebody buy a Ferrari? Is it 100% because of them? Or the impression that they'll get from other people and how that'll make them feel? See? Personal gain. Some people don't need that. Sam Walton drove a beat-up 10-year-old truck when he was a billionaire. He didn't need it. He didn't need people to go, look at me. Okay? So, personal gain. Next is conviction. Did you have a personal experience with it? Now, this becomes important because why you will do things. That's where this becomes very important. And I'll give you a couple examples. Now, conviction is a much stronger reason you'll do something because you had a personal emotional experience. Okay. That's like me in chiropractic. I hurt my tailbone when I was 15. I couldn't sit down. Went through medical care for 90 days, 3 months, no better. Went to a chiropractor, and in 3 visits, 1 week, I was 100% fine. You can't tell me chiropractic doesn't work, period. That was a personal emotional experience. And it also depends on how deep of an emotional experience. Not sitting down is pretty important in life. Okay. As an example, you can have a personal experience, but not highly motivated, conviction-wise. Let's say you hurt your hand and you couldn't play baseball in high school. So you go to the chiropractor and he helps you with your hand. Well, how important is baseball relative to survival and security in high school? It's not. So it is a level of conviction, but that in this case, it's a weaker level of conviction. Now, this becomes very important. And the reason it becomes very important is because when you pick things solely based on money or personal gain, that's when you have the highest likelihood of quitting and not overcoming. Because you have to do things. You got to get out of your comfort zone to make things happen to create the lifestyle that you want, period. It's not just going to be given to you. So when you do it for the money, those are typically those are the low achievers, and those are typically the people that quit. Those are the people that quit early. It reminds me of my freshman year in chemistry class. It was packed. Everybody wanted to be in pre-med. Everybody wanted to be a doctor, right? For the money and the status, until after the first chemistry exam. 2/3 of class was wiped out. They all went and changed their majors. It was too hard. See, they didn't want it for the right reason. Matter of fact, I just had a chiropractor quit chiropractic. He'd been out of school a little over a year. So he spent, 5 academic years going to chiropractic college, $200,000. And he just totally quit the profession. Why? He had no conviction. He never had any personal experience with chiropractic at all. He was just doing it for the money. And when he got out, how much persistence did he show to do what he needed to do to make the money? Little to none. Very little to none. I had another client start right after him that, he just quit. He just literally folded like a cheap suit. And another client that started after him already created $1 million practice. What was the difference with you? Well, one had high conviction. That was a major difference. One was totally into chiropractic, and they were willing to overcome all these obstacles that it took. The other one wasn't. He quit like a cheap suit. So conviction is unbelievably important, and it only occurs in 2 ways. Either you have an experience with it, personal experience, or a loved one's experience, or you study it over time. Like an example that I use is religion. Some people, they hit bottom and they find religion, right? We know those stories. And then some people, they just they're not very religious, and then they go to church and they go to church. Next thing you know, you meet up with them 5 years later, and they're like the holy rollers. Like, what the hell happened to them? Well, that was studying the Bible over time that changed their life. So that's what happens with conviction. It either becomes a personal emotional experience, or you study it over time. So this becomes unbelievably important relative to what you want. And I say that all the time. People say, well, what field should you get in? Right? Especially new out of college. Said the number one field you should get into when you're deciding what to do in a career is do something that you have a conviction for, that you love. Otherwise, you'll quit. That's what happens. A third of all freshmen changed their majors in the first semester. They quit. That's not because they had a strong conviction. See? So conviction becomes real important relative to what you want and where you're going and what you want to do, are tying it to conviction. And then, of course, there's self-actualization. And that's doing it for a higher cause. It's no longer about you. That's the military, it's about God and country. That's a higher cause. Or it's about your family, it's your kids. I say this all the time when I work with clients. I tell my clients, I said, clients that are having trouble overcoming this or that. I said, look in your kid's face at night and tell him you're not going to do this or that. Go ahead and tell him you're going to be a failure. Say, so self-fact is another, you'll do a lot of things at a real strong level for a higher authority like God. And I'll share with you what's the number one highest authority. When you hear about these tremendous survival, people that survive tremendous ordeals, what's the one common denominator? It wasn't God. It wasn't their wife. They survived to see their kid another day. They didn't want to die and leave their kid. That's self-actualization. That's higher authority, see? And these are real. Now, this is important because, you may need to tie it around a higher authority, your kid. What's a good reason to have a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood with less drugs and crime? To protect your kid, right? Nice for your wife, sure. But I want to protect my kid. I don't want to be exposed to that crap. And that kind of mentality that creates that crap. That's a good motivation. Okay, so let's go into motivation. And this is going to become really important for self-actualization, knowing where you are. If you do not know the type of motivation you have, chances are you won't overcome very much in life. You won't. And I'll kind of use different friends as an example. I'll use me as an example. I'll share stories with you as an example. So hopefully, so you can relate to this a little bit better. But circumstantial, and first of all, everybody thinks they're motivated. I haven't met one person yet goes, yeah, I'm not motivated. I'm a putz. No, everybody thinks they're motivated. Okay, next, let's get down to the bone here. So there's something called circumstantial motivation. That's something that happens that's very temporary. I had a flat the other day. So I was going to do A, B, C, and D, right? I had my day planned. I was going to do A, B, C, and D. I'm going along, going to do A or from A to B, and I get a flat. B didn't matter anymore. C didn't matter anymore. That flat mattered now. That flat took precedence over everything. It was short-term circumstantial. That's what it was. Recognize short-term circumstantial for what it is. It's short-term, okay? Next is external motivation. It's a little longer. Things that create pain. And by the way, we're talking about pain motivators here, not pleasure motivators. Things that affect your survival and security. So you go into external motivation. Those are things that last longer. Those are things, could be a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years, something like that. I've got a friend right now that's got serious motivation, extra short term. It's not short term, but it's external motivation. She bought a car. Well, she bought the car kind of outside of her means a little bit. It's creating pain. So what's it forcing her to do? It's forcing her to work more days and in 12-hour shifts instead of 8-hour shifts to pay that car off, to stop that pain from happening. See? So that was an external motivation that's forcing them to do something a little longer, but it doesn't last for a long time. And then there's the internal motivation, internal. And understanding this will make all the difference in your life, all the difference in your life. Internal motivation is what you are imprinted with as a child. It's not going away. It's there and it's not going away. And it doesn't matter what socioeconomic, it doesn't matter if you're out of survival, it's still there. It doesn't matter if you're out of security, it's still there. It doesn't matter if you have socialization and materialization, it's still there. Why? Because it's imprinted as a child. And this is where you will find what we call the go-getters. The go-getters. Those are the people that just, if you're not a go-getter, by the way, 80% of the population are not go-getters. They're not. They'll get out of survival, out of security, and stop. Like my friend that I was just sharing with you. Boom. And his idea of survival was real low anyway. And the other friend I was just sharing with you that bought a car. As soon as the car's paid for, she won't do anymore. She's now out of survival, not security. She won't do anything else to elevate the quality of her life. Okay. That's the masses. So the masses of people do not have internal imprinting that will push them, drive them further once they're out of survival and security. So what are we talking about when we talk about imprinting? It's when they were hurt as a child. Now remember, we're talking pain and pleasure here, because we will move toward pleasure and away from pain, but what will be the strongest? Moving toward pleasure? No. What will be the strongest is moving away from pain, and it determines on how deep that pain is. Well, what's the deepest pain that there is? Survival. What's the second deepest? Security, say. What's the third? Socialization. There's people that'll do stuff just because they don't want to look bad amongst their peers, their house, their car, their clothes, etc. Okay. So you go into external, you go into internal. And this becomes real important relative to lifestyle and goal setting, because the internal person, man, the internal person's going to do a lot more even without creating goals, because they keep running. They keep pushing. Even if they didn't write down goals, they just keep running because they're running away from something. And this is what I found when I read the biographies. When you read successful people, Teddy Roosevelt, Ted Turner, and you go into their biographies where that shares, usually a lot of deep information, they had huge pain-based imprinting, emotional pain-based imprinting. I'll share with you a couple stories of comparison and contrast right now. So what happened with me? Why is it that I went from a middle lower class blue collar neighborhood? My father did not have a college education. My father had to drop out of high school, GED, joined the military. And then my father basically just was a retired military person on a retired military budget. And my mom was a maid. So we didn't have anything. I mean, when my mom got paid being a maid, our big deal was KFC chicken. Every 2 weeks we got to go to eat out at KFC chicken when my mom got her check from being a maid. So I remember only having one new pair of jeans all through high school, one new pair of jeans. That's it. So what happened with me? Why is it that and this is when I started studying this more and more, I wanted to be successful in chiropractic. Well, all my other chiropractic people did too, right? Right out of college. And so I would hit, 100 patient visits a week. They would hit, but I noticed that when most chiropractors hit about 100, 150 visits a week, their drive quits. They stopped doing things to build their business. I didn't. I kept pushing like a son of a bitch. I went to 200 visits a week. Then I went to my first associate doctor, my second associate doctor, my second office, my third office. Then I started buying real estate and apartment complexes. And why was I doing that? Why could I not let go and just relax? Like 90% of my peers, because I was imprinted with pain. And what happened with me is I was real close to my mom. I'm the only child of five, or the baby child of five. And I was close to my mom. And I remember, I'd sit at the end of the night, I'd lay down with my mom and my mom would just talk. And she didn't know it. But now remember, I'm highly attached emotional to my mom. She's my mom. And my mom is telling me how bad things are financially. So I'm feeling the hurt in my mom. She didn't know she was hurting her young kid. She was creating deep pain within me. And that's why I said, I will never let finances be a problem in my family. So that's the drive I was imprinted. And so it didn't matter when I made $100,000 or $200,000 or 500. It didn't matter. I was pushing because in my mind, I was still in survival. And this is where you have to know where you're at. And so let me contrast that to a friend of mine who was an only child. Well, he was given everything. He didn't have to do anything. He was given a new car for graduation. When he turned 16, he was given a car. He didn't have to do anything. So where was his idea of survival? His parents unwittingly thought they were being good parents by not having him do anything and give him everything. He didn't have to work after school. They lowered his motivation level naturally. They imprinted him with low survival. He has naturally low survival. And so he won't get off his ass until things are really bad. That's when he'll like come out of his cocoon fighting, you know. So, and I saw this with the doctors. So when I was interviewing doctors and I started opening offices, I noticed some people did better than others. And I noticed there was a clear difference in the doctors who were imprinted with pain as a child. Divorce, alcoholism, drugs, no or lack of emotional attachment, stuff like that. Clear difference. The doctors who had that pain imprinting as a child overwhelmingly skyrocketed, did real well naturally. The doctors who kind of were given everything, that were like in a middle upper class family and kind of had to do everything, didn't have to work, their parents bought them the first car, that kind of thing. They didn't have to work when they were in college or high school. They overwhelmingly putzed out real early, usually at 80 to 120 visits a week. They just plateaued and that was it. See, they were imprinted differently with survival. Now, this becomes real important, knowing what kind of person you are, because goal setting now becomes unbelievably important for 80% of the population that was not imprinted with pain. This is the only way to overcome it. And when you don't put this in place, you'll naturally just plateau at a low level and you won't be able to overcome it. I've just found. So the vast majority of people who do not have that built-in drive from pain-based imprinting, this is their way out. This is their way to exceed and create a lifestyle above what they even think is possible. Otherwise, it won't happen. And I'm just telling you from personal experience, training a lot of doctors, a lot of employees. And when they don't apply this formula, they plateau and they stay plateaued the rest of their life. That's what I found. This is the formula, this 10-step formula we're going through. This is the formula that has to be applied to that person, or they will not achieve big things in life or exceptional or live a much better lifestyle than just getting average. I would say the worst doctor that I have to deal with is somebody who's not pain-based imprinted, that's making $100,000 a year. That's the hardest doctor to get to do anything. Recently, I had a doctor I found out wasn't achieving very much. And I'm like, well, he's got a lot of potential, but he's not achieving, which happens. I'll see that every now and then. And then I find out that there's a lot of money in the family. I'm like, oh, he doesn't even have his thermometer. It's not even there. He knows there's money. He knows there's money there to save his ass. He doesn't have to do anything. See, this stuff matters. So I have found if you're that 80% person who does not have that pain-based imprint, and that's most of us, the only way out of it is this formula that I'm going through right now, which is the goal setting formula. So it becomes vital to being able to increase your quality of lifestyle and not just be average. And I'll just share another quick example with you. I just had two doctors, not just, but within 30 years. So these doctors were practicing together and they were seeing 70 visits a week each for 5 years. I'm like, that's plateauing. 5 years. I'm like, well, finally, one of them was frustrated enough. In other words, created enough pain to change those habits. So they contact me. We start straightening up their practice. And what was his motivating factor? Well, he got divorced. He had kids and he got divorced. His expenses went up. And so his life situation, he didn't have dual income anymore. See? So he wanted to do more with the kids, but he couldn't afford it. And he couldn't see his kids as often. So I'm like, he's in a bad situation. So the dynamics in his life changed. And I'll just share with you this. This happens a lot. One of the common causes that doctors call me to help them grow their business is a doctor seeing like 80 visits a week to 120 visits a week. But his wife works. So between his income, which might be 80 to 100 and say 50,000 or 120, and her income, they're making $100,000 to $200,000 a year. Well, that totally takes them out of survival and security. And it putzes them. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. And the doctor doesn't do anything else until the wife says, I want to stop working and have kids. Wham! You talk about pain-based motivation. That's the guy that calls me now, because he now knows he's not only going to not have this income, it's going to cost more money with the kid. See, this is the difference it makes in understanding your pain level and how to handle it, what you need to do. Otherwise, you get trapped. You don't even know it. You don't even pay attention to it. You're not even aware of it. You get trapped. And next thing you know, it's quarter after quarter and year after year. Well, this doctor spent 5 years putzing around. How much money did he lose in 5 years by seeing 70 visits a week when he could have seen 200? That was about $3 million in lost productivity. $3 million. So what happens when the other doctor quits? And then, of course, it was easier for him because the other doctor was paying half the overhead. So huge complacency for 5 years until he finally was frustrated enough. So he learns how to run the business. So the other doctor leaves. Oh, what just happened to the pain level? It just went up. Why did it go up? Now he's got to cover all of the overhead. So the first thing that happened, he comes and he's willing to do things and he doubles his practice. He goes from like 70 to 140 visits a week from that pain. Well, now the other doctor leaves and he's responsible for all the overhead now. Pain again. So what did he do? Took it from 200 to 140 to 240 visits a week. What created that? He stayed at 70 visits for 5 years, barely getting by, crappy lifestyle, renting an apartment, driving an old car, not being able to, buy the kids what he wants and take them on vacation when he wants and all that kind of stuff. That to increasing his income over $300,000 a year. What did that? Pain. That's what did it. Okay. Let's go into this. Now, again, you can control this, but if you don't even know that you're stuck, you won't even be able to apply this. And it'll be you year after year after year. So pleasure motivation is only 5%. Pain-based motivation is 80%. So you see these people, I had a private plane. Was it because of pleasure? No, the pain kept driving me when I went to the next office, the next office, the next office. And it's not about the money. That's what people go, oh, he's just greedy. That's ignorant people talking is what that is. It has nothing to do with greed. It has to do with running away from being imprinted and then just taking the next step, taking the natural next step. Well, the natural next step was a plane so I can open more offices. Why would I need to open more offices when I'm making $1 million a year? I'm out of survival, I'm out of security. Why? Because I'm imprinted with it. I've got to run from it. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with another $1 million. And that's what people don't understand. Oh, they're greedy. No, they're not greedy. There's only 10% of millionaires that were given that, it's from family. 90% of them busted their ass to make it. Imprinting childhood, pain-based motion. So this becomes huge when understanding goals and paradigms and limitations. You don't understand human nature, you're not going to overcome it because it's pretty damn strong. Human nature is unbelievably strong to keep you complacent. So, levels of consciousness. Be aware of the levels of consciousness. So we go from conscious incompetence. That's when we don't even know what we don't know. I mean, there's so many. This is like the worst state of awareness to be in. You don't even know what to do and where to go because you can't see it. Could I see how to open 2 offices, 3 offices, 20? Could I see how to buy an apartment complex when I was out of school? No, I couldn't even envision it. Unconscious incompetence. That's the worst place to be. Don't even know what you don't know. And then conscious incompetence is when you do know, but you don't have the ability. And then conscious competence is you do know, and you do it, but you're not real good at it. Your results aren't real good. And then, of course, the best place to be is unconscious competence in anything. That's when you're like a black belt and you're good at it. You don't even have to think about it and you're good at it. Okay. So why do you need to know this? Why do you need to know this if you want to change your lifestyle? You got to know where you at. I said this all the time. I said, just because, this is my self-talk. Just because I do not know how to do something does not mean it can't be done. That was my self-talk. I never let something stop me because that's my self-talk. I just go, well, just because I don't know how to do it doesn't mean it can't be done. I just need to find out how to do it or find somebody that knows how to do it. See? That's a very different perspective than, oh, that can't be done. Or that doesn't work. See, those are very different perspectives. Okay, so levels of consciousness. So how do you get from one to the next? Well, from unconscious incompetence is books, seminars, and tapes. That's what creates an awareness about you. You go, oh, I didn't know that. What takes you from conscious incompetence to where you don't have the ability to conscious competence? You have the ability, but you're not very good at it. It's got to be sensory and motor. Now, right now, I'm getting ready to cover why 97% of the people fail. The number one reason. There's a lot of little reasons. This is the number one reason I'm getting ready to cover right now. You can know of something and then not be good at it. Say you want to do something, whatever it is, okay? Conscious incompetence. Well, what does it take to get from there to actually being successful at it to some degree? Well, it takes sensory and motor. Here's what it takes. You've got to be able to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to be able to do something different. Here's the problem. What's the second highest need in life working against you? You got the second, Mother Nature. Mother Nature protects us, that we will do everything we can to create survival, stability, okay? And then create security. We don't need a seminar. We don't need a book. That's Mother Nature, okay? Now, what stops us from going to the next level, to doing more than just getting by? Well, it's the second highest need in life. It's security. So the very thing that you want, which is security, you're running away from the get. Once you have security, that becomes the major inhibiting factor, because we do not want to do something different because it challenges security. And how strong is security? It's the second highest need in life. Mother Nature will beat the hell out of you. Just like Mother Nature is really good at taking you out of survival. I don't have to read a book on how to do that. That's some real strong instincts there. Well, those same instincts are now working against you. And so if you don't know how to overcome that, you'll just stay plateaued. And if you don't have internal pain printing, to blast through that, that's it. You'll plateau. And that's where the masses of society is. They're living just, paycheck to paycheck within, 90 days of not being able to pay their mortgage. They're just out of survival, just out of security. Now, do they bust their ass to do more? No. They just get by again, and then they get by again, and then they get by again. So they do enough to get out of the pain, but what's stopping them from going further now? Well, the pain's over, so the natural drive's over, but it's worse than that. Now they got a force that they don't even see working against them. So one of the strongest forces of you not attaining what you want in your life is the second highest force in life, which is security. In other words, Mother Nature wants you to be secure and not challenge and not risk and do something different. That's called homeostasis. So you're going to stay the same. And you look around, and one way you can see how's this applying to yourself. I always say there's one way you can tell if this is applying to yourself. Go to quarter. What's changed in the last quarter? Have you done anything different in the last quarter? If you haven't, nothing's going to change in the next quarter. See, people think things are going to change. They don't do anything. They don't change anything at all, but they think something's going to change. That's just ridiculous. And of course, those people don't do well in life. Usually those are the same people that quit and blame everybody else for their inadequacies. Okay, so you got unconscious competence. So what's a major concept? And then when you get to conscious competence, it's not difficult to be good at something. It just takes discipline and repetition. That's not difficult at all. And it's not difficult going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. That's not difficult. It's people just don't know it. It's a very easy gate to open. It's a very easy door to open. They just don't know there's a door, but it's not difficult. It's very difficult to get from stage 2 to 3. You got the second highest natural force in the universe working against you. Look around. You don't believe me? Look around. How many people are just living middle class, middle or blue collar class? How many people are in the middle class? The masses. With everything that's available, TV, computer, all the free education, with everything that's totally available to increase their socioeconomic status, and they don't. Why? That's why. Now, if you don't recognize it, so why am I putting so much focus on it? You don't recognize it. In other words, when I do something, I want to do something different. I already know there's always some realizations that I always consciously immediately come to mind. When I'm thinking about doing something, I go up, I'm going to have the learning curve. I go up. I know I'm going to have a lot of resistance in the beginning. It's going to take a lot of energy in the beginning. I already know that. I already know it's going to be real easy to quit in the beginning. And that gets me ready for the fight. And there's several other strategies I use to overcome that. And that's how I was able to do what I did and continue to do these things. So this becomes the levels of consciousness become unbelievably important, that if you're not even aware of something, first you got to, is there somebody aware, how do you get to that point? It's books, seminars, tapes. And then the next is, well, when you actually are going to want to do it, you've got everything against you not doing it. First, you'll talk yourself out of it. Why? Mother Nature. Mother Nature doesn't want you to risk. Mother Nature does not want you to challenge security. It's the second highest drive in life. Now it becomes a major force to inhibit you in life and remain in homeostasis, safe. Remember, Mother Nature is about survival. It's about safety. Get out of survival and security, but don't go past it because you may be risking something. See? So if you're not even aware of it, that's just what happens to you. This is what happens to the masses of people. They don't even know it. You won't even be able to act on it. The big picture. So if you stand back and you look at this goal setting thing in the big picture, what should the picture look like? Okay, we want a carrot. In other words, that's what you want. The carrot's the pole, right? But then you go, well, how strong is the carrot? Well, it's not strong at all. I say, everybody wants to be a millionaire. How many people are busting their ass to be a millionaire? Why? Unfamiliarity. Again, pushing against the ceiling of security. They don't want to do anything unfamiliar. Don't do anything unfamiliar, which means you're going to get the same results. So you go, okay, there needs to be a carrot. So there does need to be one, but let's put it in perspective. It's weak. That's not what's going to get you there. If it would, the masses in the United States with all our resources would be multimillionaires. We got unbelievable resources and free resources. They're not being utilized. That's why. So you go, we got the carrot, and we go to the stick. Okay, what's the stick? That's the motivation. You go, okay, well, what kind of motivation do we have? Do we have circumstantial, internal, right? Do we have external? In other words, how strong of a drive is this going to be? Is it just because of the money? Is it because of personal gain? Is it about conviction? Or is it about self-actualization? So you see this thing called drive becomes very important because this isn't. And you got to acknowledge that. And then you go, if you write a goal and you go, or you want to go, and it's not internal or external pain, and it's because of the money and you're not in survival or security, chances are you'll never even start. Forget failing and quitting. You won't even start. You'll talk yourself out of it. So this becomes very important is what are you going to put in that motivation category? Because that's essentially what's going to determine whether or not you're going to be able to overcome obstacle after obstacle after obstacle after obstacle to get to what you want. That's it. And then understanding you. So if you're not the kind of person that has internal imprinted pain, you better damn well know this formula and you better apply it. Or you're just going to be status quo like 80, 90% of the masses, just living above socioeconomic means. So that's the stick. Then you go, okay, what's the guard? We got to have guardrails. Can't go off. We can't go off to the, can't go over here and go over here. Can't get distracted. Then we got to have micro steps. We got to take whatever it is we want to do, and you got to break it down into unbelievably small steps. And now, what's the rule with steps? You got to keep breaking it down until you're willing to take the first step. If you're not willing to take the first step is too big, or the purpose, the motivation is wrong. Remember, this is a push-pull. This is not easy. You've got to know how this works because you got everything working against you, quite frankly. If you're not in survival and security, you got everything working against you. Okay, so that's micro steps. So we're going to, whatever it is, it's like I wanted to learn how to go sailing. So what did I do? I bought a sailboat. Did I know how to sail? No. But I knew if I bought the sailboat, I already knew the steps. So I bought the sailboat, and then what's the fastest way from get to point A to point B? Well, the worst way is experience. Most people quit. Book, seminars, and tapes. Well, that only takes you from unconscious incompetence to conscious competence. Book, seminars, tape. Experience or mentoring is the fastest way to get from point A to point B. In other words, when you have a mentor that knows how to pull and knows how to push and has already done it, and that's the rule with mentoring. You never hire a mentor unless they've done it or are doing it, whatever that activity is. Because everybody will tell you how to do everything. Your brother will tell you how to run a practice, and he doesn't never run a business in his life. So you go into, so I buy the sailboat,
Why? I knew it was going to make me do it. What else? So in other words, I knew, okay. And by the way, why did I want to sell? I wanted to sell in the islands. I wanted that to be part of my lifestyle, where I could vacation and stay on my sailboat and sell in the islands. So then I buy a sailboat. Did I know how to sail? No. But I know the formula. What did I do next? Did I sit around and wait for something to happen? No. I did the best thing you can do to get from point A to point B. I hired a mentor. So I hired the leader of the local sailboat company. I personally hired him one-on-one to come out and work with me and take me out on my sailboat. Tell me exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. In other words, I had to go through sensory and motor with repetition, with the motivation behind me and the guidance and and the guardrails. So there was the carrot, there was the stick and the guardrails, and then the baby steps. If it was going too much, I'd say, slow down. I don't understand that. I got that step. Okay, what's next? Next step. I learned how to sell fast, real fast, because I understood the steps involved to get from point A to point B. I learned how to overcome my inhibitions and fears. Micro steps. So you always take it to the smallest point until you're willing to take the step. If you're not willing to take the step, if the step's either too big or you got crap for motivation. It's one of those two. And in other words, you're going nowhere. And then you have to remove the negative feedback as much as possible. As much as while you're learning to do something, you got to remove the feedback. I teach doctors how to buy real estate, owner financing real estate. So I learned how to do that. Okay. Do I tell them to go out and buy the first step? No. I go, here's all the steps. I said, but we're only going to do this. And here's the deal. It's not going to work out. I do not want you to think it's going to work out. As a matter of fact, I'll tell them, it's not. I just want you to get used to that one step. But I'm telling you right now, it's not going to work. So don't even think you're going to buy the house, okay? In other words, what did I do? I'm totally eliminating the negative feedback, because the negative feedback is a major factor which inhibits us from taking the next step. That self-perceived negative feedback. You don't learn to overcome these. You don't learn how to put them in place. Don't expect much more of a lifestyle. Let's go into the next category, third category. Say your goals out loud daily. If you've not read or bought the audio book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, read it. Buy the audio book. We gravitate toward conscious and subconscious vision of ourselves. When you say things out loud, that's why you should never degrade yourself. That's why you should always promote yourself. Stimulate your unconscious servo mechanism. It reinforces your strength and commitment, and it's sensory and motor that creates overwhelming motivation. Remember, sensory and motor is very powerful. Sensory, seeing and doing, and then doing is very powerful. I'll share with you two powerful strategies I used. Unbelievably strong. Okay. So here's the basics of Psycho-Cybernetics. And bottom line is, you're going to gravitate toward the person that you see yourself as, consciously or subconsciously. That's what will happen. And a lot of that's been imprinted. So this is another reason why it's very hard to get out of your socioeconomic where you were raised. And sometimes you can go one level, and it's very, very difficult to go two levels. Very difficult. So what happened with Psycho-Cybernetics? Well, Maxwell Maltz, what he was is a plastic surgeon. And he recognized, he saw women come in that would get like facials. And some of the facials were like fantastic. He'd like recognized he did a fantastic job. And some of the women came back and they're like, man, this is great. And he immediately knowed their self-esteem, their confidence totally change from cosmetic surgery. And then the same person who had great surgery didn't change at all. And that's what led to this study of psychocybernetics. Basically, what he learned is you will act and react based on how you perceive yourself. So he did the same surgery. It was good surgery, but some women still had their old belief system, even though they had good surgery. And some women bought into it. They believed that surgery, and they became that person. That's the importance. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Two things that happened that were dramatic in my life that propelled me to all those statistics you saw earlier. One is I was a very C student. I was not an A student. I was the classic jock all the way through school, high school. I did not have good study skills. I was a C student. Okay. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, I wanted to be a chiropractor because when I was 15, I had that chiropractic experience. And so I'm like, yeah, I definitely. But now I looked at the school that was involved, how much schooling and studying was involved. And I'm like, I knew where I was at as a C student and my behavior as a C student was not going to make it. So I did several things, but one of the biggest things that I did is I wrote down on this little index card. And it reinforced, it gave me strength. It gave me unbelievable strength. I'm getting ready to share with you very two personal things that gave me unbelievable strength, inner strength. Okay. So the first one is the index card. And I wrote on the card, persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And I couldn't tell you who wrote that. It's a well-known phrase. But it resonated with me. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. What does that mean? It means you could pretty much get what you want if you're persistent, if you're determined and you're persistent. Well, I became a very determined and persistent bastard is what I did. I wasn't smart. I had to study twice as long as another student to get the same grade. But I knew that. So I put the time in. I studied twice as long to get the same grade. And I had that little index card in front of me on my desk all through college. And right before, when I sat down to study, I had my study hours and write down, I would read that. I'd read that several times, persistence and determination alone, omnipotent persistence. And it reminded me that I can drive through this thing. I can push through this thing every day. That's the servo mechanism of psychocybernetics, Maxwell Maltz. And this was before I even read it. I didn't even know about psychocybernetics at this point in time. That's why when I read psychocybernetics, I'm going, my God, that's what I did. I did exactly what I controlled my servo mechanism. I didn't let my environment control my servo mechanism. I was proactive and I controlled it. And it was huge. It was unbelievably powerful. And then there was another thing, and this is personal, but I'll share it with you. Hopefully you can relate to it. Is every day I'd get out of the shower in front of the room, in front of the mirror. And my name was, my name as a kid was Rich Richard. So they'd call me Rich when I was a kid. Paul Richard. So my kid name was Rich, not Paul. So I'd get out of the shower. And every day I'd get out of the shower, I'd look in the mirror. So it's very personal. And I would say, Rich, you can do it. You shall do it. You will do it. Just like that. Exactly what I'm doing with you in this video right now. I'd point my finger. I'd look at myself. I'd say my name, personalize it. I said, Rich, you can do it. You shall do it. You will do it. And I did it about 3, 4, 5 times. And the tempo would get higher and higher. Rich, you shall do it, you can do it, you will do it. You can do it, you shall do it, you will do it. You can do it, you shall do it, you will do it. I did that 3, 4, 6 times till it raised the roof every day. Go ahead and try that and be weak. Go ahead and do that every day for yourself and then be weak. You can't be weak when you tell yourself you're a strong SOB. That's what I did. So by that servo mechanism, I was telling myself every day, nobody's going to stop me. I'm busting through everything and anything that's in front of me, period. That's what happened. That's how I ended up making over $100 million a year, going from middle, low class, blue collar, and receiving 3 degrees with a doctorate degree. That's called persistence and determination. So this is real. Unfortunately, it works the other way also. When you say you can't do something, or you see yourself as being limited, you will not be able to overcome it. The very first perception is your perception of yourself. That's why it's so important as a mother or father to imprint upon their children how valuable they are, to give them that self-confidence and that self-esteem. Okay. Most difficult to easiest methods. We already talked about this. What's the most difficult way to get from point A to point B? Experience. Like that doctor I was telling you, he went 5 years without doing anything, staying at 70 visits a week, barely getting by. He just based it on experience. Books, seminars, and tapes will take you from, most of the time with experience, you'll talk yourself out of it. And then when you do try it, you'll have a negative experience and then you'll stop. That's what happens most of the time. Book, seminars, or tape, remember, will take you from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. But it's the sensory and motor of a mentorship that has the carrot and the stick with guidelines and micro steps and removing the negative feedback. That's the key. That's the absolute key, is that picture frame, carrot, stick. And of course, there's way more to it when we say carrot. There's way more to it than we say stick. Guidelines, micro steps, remove the negative. That's the formula. And of course, an unbelievably powerful formula when you plug in the reason why you're doing it. When the reason is for personal, or is for conviction and self-actualization, and especially when it's tied to a pain motivator. See, that's like off the charts. And it's just the opposite when you don't. That's why so many people just quit. They got weak motivators, amongst other things. Okay, so the result circle, this is the result circle. Show your thoughts create the feelings, your feelings create the actions, your actions create the results. Well, what's the problem with this circle? Where is always the short circuit? Well, it's usually the feelings. So it's usually not the thoughts, although if you're in a state of unconscious incompetence, it's the thoughts. You don't even know any better. So it's usually the feelings. Why is that such a problem? Well, this is when Mother Nature's working against you. Mother Nature's trying to keep you at a state of homeostasis and not do anything unfamiliar. And when you don't do anything unfamiliar, there's nothing that changes, which means no results at all. This is why it has become so important cognitively to understand these components, because you got so much working against you. You got everything working for you to get out of survival and out of security. And you got all that now working against you to increase the quality of your lifestyle. That's why it's so important to not only be aware of them and know how to overcome them, especially if you're not the person that was imprinted with deep personal pain as a child, and 80% of us were not. That's why we plateau. Next category, you got to write it down. You have a 97% failure rate from this alone. You don't write it down, 97% chance it's not even going to happen. All of my clients I trained were required to write all this stuff down. They couldn't just think of it. I'm like, no, you had to write it down. Harvard study, 97% chance of not attaining a goal if it's not written down. You're guaranteed to lose if it's not written down. Goals not written down are dreams. You can always rewrite or modify as necessary. Keep written goals in a place you will see them daily. I wrote my goals down. I had my short term, I had my 1 year, and I had my 5+ years. And I just wrote all the things, that it would apply to me, that I wanted, where I wanted to go, all that kind of stuff. And then I would look at them. Now I put them where I put my keys, because one of the keys is you got to see it every day. It can't just be in a computer and you never turn it on. You've got to see it every day. You got to be reminded of this. What are you doing? What are you doing every day? Why are you doing it? So I put them right there, right where I kept my keys in my wallet. I always keep my keys in the wallet in the same place. Boom. They were right there. All right. Saw them right there. And then I'd pull them out. I'd pull them out every quarter and I'd just go through them, especially at the end of the year. And I would check them off. I go, oh, got that. Oh, got that. And at the end of the year, I would reevaluate it and go, is that still valuable to me? Is that still something I want to do? If it wasn't something I wanted to do, because, life changes, I just left it off. But if it was still something on there I wanted to do, but I hadn't done it or hadn't acted on, I kept it on. And I'll give you one example that I remember was a marathon. I always wanted to run a marathon. And that thing was on there forever. Run a marathon. That was, a 5+ year goal. Run a marathon, run a marathon, run a marathon. It was on there forever. Until 20 years later, circumstances were right. Not just circumstances, but I made it happen. So I went and involved myself and I ran the Hawaii Marathon. It wasn't for speed. I just wanted to do it. It was just something I wanted to do in my life that I said I could do. And the Hawaii Marathon was not only was it a place I was going to go vacation for a while, but the other reason I did it, it was great weather. And the other reason is there was no time limit to do it. It was open to anybody. And so, a lot of marathons, there's minimum time limits. So it was open to anybody. You could walk, you could run, you could go as fast as you want, as slow as you want. I'm like, okay, I'll be able to do it. I'll be able to do it. Because that wasn't overwhelmingly what I wanted in my life, run marathons, but I wanted to run at least one marathon in my life. So boom, planned it out, checked the box. Done. And that took about 20 years to get to that goal, but it stayed on my list. Check, it's done. I've done it. You don't write it down, it's not going to happen. It's just a dream. If you don't write it down, it's just a dream. You've got to write it down. You've got to put these things, you got to write it down. You got a 97% chance of never attaining something if you don't write it down. Timeline and deadline. Next category is timeline and deadline. The more structured the timeline, the higher the likelihood of attaining the goal. Place micro steps in the timeline. If the deadlines are too far out, they do not create the motivation. Deadlines are too close, they don't allow for success. So the deadline is totally dependent on the difficulty of the goal. I'll give you some examples. Some doctors will come to me and they'll go, I'll ask what they want to do with patient visits, and they'll go, I'd like to have, see this amount of patient visits at least by the end of the year. And it might be like 8 months. And I'm going, no. See, that doctor didn't know enough that was way too far out. That they would never even start acting on it until it was like toward the end of the year. I said, no, we're moving this to 90 days, not the end of the year. See, but that doctor didn't know any better. So your deadlines and timelines, they matter, but you do want to put down, like, I told you my deadline was from quarterly to 1 year to 5 years. So they were in those categories. And if I didn't attain them, then I'd made a decision. Do I still want to keep it? Is it still valuable to me? Do I still want to go after it? And I'll just share with you from experience, it was about 50% or more, at least 50% of all of those goals I wrote down happened within the time frame that I wrote it down. And the ones that didn't, I transposed to the next year if they were still valuable to me. And then the same thing happened. Over 50% of those I attained. Well, go ahead and start doing that. Go ahead and have 5, 10, 15, 20 things written down that you want to do. And then go ahead and start achieving 50% of them every year, and watch how fast your quality of lifestyle skyrockets. So timeline, time and deadline. There has to be a deadline, and it can't be too far out. There's got to be a timeline. It's got to be written down. Next category. Post an accurate picture. Create a picture of the goal. Remember, 55% of how it communicates is visual. The more clarity in the picture, the better. The color, the size, the style, the make, the model. One of the things I used to do with all my guys I trained, not only were they required to have the goal down and how they were going to do it and the steps to do it, they had to have the vision poster. They had to put on there what they wanted in that certain time frame. The common ones are like a car and a house or vacation with new doctors. They had to have the specific house. They couldn't just put a house on the board. I'm like, no, what color's the house? What's the texture of the house? Is it brick? Is it wood? Is it 2-story? In other words, it had to be very specific, because remember, the less specific it is, the easier it is for you to give up on your dream, give up on your goals. And the visuals, the more specific and clear, the better. And it has to be placed where you see it daily. I required the doctors to place it in their office. That's the bad thing about a computer. You do this on a computer, you'll never look at it. You'll never pull it up and look at it. That's why some of these things can't be on the computer. You know, it's got to be written down where you see it every day without turning the computer on, or a poster where you see it every day where you don't have to turn something on. See, that's what it has to be. And by the way, these steps that I'm talking to you about are unbelievably, huge success rate with these steps that I'm going through right now. This is exactly what I did when I was training doctors. And by the way, my average doctor averaged 222 patient visits at the end of the first year from new in practice, and 52% of them had already gone out and failed before they came with me. So 50% of them were failures before they came with me. The training took them, and in their first year in practice, they averaged 222 patient visits. That's twice the national average. This is exactly what we did. It was training, and it was goal setting, and it was these steps, tying it all together. It wasn't just wandering around being reactive every damn day. You're being reactive you're going in and just being reactive every day. You're going to get nothing in your life except the status quo. You're going to get beat down every day if you're reactive every day. So you do want to process the business, but there's a certain part of that day that needs to be proactive in the direction you want to go with the steps that's going to take you there. Okay, number 7, create micro steps. Break down goal into very small steps, allows for micro success. Minimize perceived obstacles until you're able to take action. This is huge. So many people never start because they mentally stop themselves from taking the first step. It's unbelievably difficult for people to get this concept. Whatever it is you're thinking of doing, you have to break it down. And here's the rule. If you're not willing to take that first step, your step's too big, or your motivation is too weak. Correct one of them or both of them. But you have to, if you got the motivation in place and you decrease the step, you'll naturally take that step and then do it again. You'll take that step and then do it again. That's how I learned to fly. That's how I learned to sail. That's how I learned to scuba dive. That's how I'm doing a cross-country tour on my motorcycle right now. Just finished half of the United States. In steps, micro steps. Huge component of the next step. So many people think they should just get from here to there and they never even fail, or they never even succeed. Knowing how to train yourself is unbelievably important. Number 8, macro and micro rewards. Positive informative, positive input is important. Always reward yourself for attaining even micro steps. Small rewards matter. Increase the reward with increased attainment. So let's say you want to get from point A to point B, whatever that is. And point B is the reward, the ultimate reward, right? Whether it's a house, a car, teaching, you're coaching your kids' basketball team, whatever it is. Every time you take a little step toward that, reward yourself. Even if it's an ice cream. I can't tell you how many times I've rewarded myself by going to Dairy Queen, and because that's not normal for me. I won't eat ice cream routinely in my life. But I'm like, I'm going to get a reward. I'm going down to Dairy Queen. Or I'm going to do a reward. I'm going to go out to a nice dinner. Just these little rewards. Reward yourself when you do take that step. 9, make public. This is another big one. Make public, acknowledge goals to loved ones. Accountability partner is unbelievably valuable. Most of my clients see me as that. And they tell me, they say, I kind of see you as my accountability partner. Because not many people are going to tell them right or wrong, right? You're self-employed in your business. Who's going to tell you what the hell to do or that you're screwing up? Well, Dr. Paul will. Okay. So an accountability partner, I'll share with you some experiences with that. Fortunately, when I started practice, I started at the same time, right about the same time that a friend of mine was starting. And we had the same mentality as far as practice, philosophy, all that stuff. And so, man, every day at the end of the morning, I'm calling him or calling me, and we're always comparing notes. What did you do? What did you do? What did you do? What did you? We're always comparing. We always held each other accountable. And we were both single at the time. We'd have dinner 3 to 4 nights a week after the office. We'd go to dinner. Why would we go to dinner? We'd talk about business. We go, okay, what's working? What worked for you? What didn't work? Man, that accountability partner is unbelievable. I've got one that I've had for 40 years now. And I'm a high choleric. He's a high melancholic. He's high detail. So I'll blast forward and he's in the great detail. So every time I do something business-wise, and he's business-minded, I will always ask his opinion. Why will I ask his opinion? Because I'll see it like this, and he'll get me to see it like this. He'll show me the 180 degrees of what I'm not seeing. That's why I always go to him. And oftentimes he'll get me to see things I didn't think of or consider. So it's great if you can have a wife, like if you're married and your wife's on the same level as you, that's great. Unfortunately, that's not common. In chiropractic, so many times the wife wants nothing to do with the business. They don't want to learn the business. They don't want to learn business concepts. And that's a really bad thing, unfortunately, especially if both of you are in the same office. That's a huge problem. But if you have a wife and you see this, and it's very infrequent that if you do see a wife that's on the same level as the husband, and let's say they're 2 chiropractors, that office usually kicks butt because they're growing at the same level fast and they're accountable. They're holding each other accountable. So whether it's a wife, a business associate, somebody that's on the same journey, that's a key. Is somebody on the same journey as you? Mentors, that's a lot of times what mentors are. Although it's nice to have somebody you don't have to pay, that's an accountability partner. That happens a lot of times with my clients. My clients will kind of start to know other clients and they'll start talking to them and then they'll become friends and then they kind of become accountability partners. And I have clients that went into business together and did stuff together and then start vacationing with their families together. That's called an accountability partner. So, when you're self-employed, it's a lonely, lonely island out there. And that's why it's really helpful to have an accountability partner make it acknowledge what publicly to your family, what you're trying to do, to your loved ones, because that'll help hold you accountable. So even if it's not an accountability partner, tell your wife or tell your kids, say, hey, I'm trying to do this for this reason. That'll make you more accountable. So creates pain-based motivation, must be the ones that care about the most. You do not want to let down the people you love. Be careful with friends. Be careful with sharing it with friends. They'll ridicule you. Some of the first people that want to take you down is your family members and friends. Very few people want to see you succeed. I always tell my clients, I said, there's only two people in this world that want to see you succeed. Your mom and me. That's the only people that really want to see you kick ass. Everybody else is going to get jealous of. And that gets to be a big problem, to be honest with you. Some doctors aren't willing to let go of the people that are inhibiting and holding them back. I had to let go of a lot of friends along the way to make $1 million, $2 million a year. They can't relate. Some of these, now I got one friend that was totally fine and encouraging, which is really unusual. So his income stayed down around $150,000, and he was totally for me making, millions. And he treated me normal and he supported me. That was totally unusual. Every other friend, including family members, coming after you. So you don't want to tell your friends unless they're on the same journey, but you want to tell an accountability partner because it'll make you actually do it. I'll give you one example. I had one client who was he was a low achiever. He was the typical doctor that saw 120 visits a week and putzed out. He was out of survival, out of security. That's it. You couldn't get him to do anything else. So we applied this. So I literally walked through this with his wife, and his wife helped to maintain accountability, but he still would bullshit his wife. So his wife wasn't even that good of accountability because he would just BS her. So what I did is I found out who he cared about in his life that he didn't want to let down. And it turned out to be his father-in-law, his wife's father. He really had a great relationship with him. He cared about him, respected him. I go, that's the person we need to tie you to. So we wrote this out in all these steps of what he wanted. We tied it to his father-in-law, acknowledging it to his father-in-law, what he's trying to do. And when he did it, his father-in-law was going to get a cruise. Him and his wife were going to get a cruise when he attained what he was trying to do. We targeted 6 months. It happened in 3 months. And that's how fast it happened. He did not want, in other words, now he got off his ass because he didn't want to let down the person he respected and admired the most. He wanted to nail it, and he went and immediately got off his ass and did it. What changed that? What changed that person from just staying on his ass? That's what changed it. We tied it to a high motivator where there was going to be pain-based motivation, high pain-based motivation, if he didn't do it. See, that's the principle here. And I'll give you an example that I did when I first started triathlons. I announced it. And I remember halfway, and it was tough. The first one was tough. And the water part, there's the run, there's the bike, and then there's water. And halfway through the water, I wanted to quit. It was tough. And there was one thing that kept me going. I was not going to post. I posted on Facebook with all my friends. I was not going to post that I failed. That was it. I mean, I can tell you right now in my mind, I'm like, I am not failing. There's no way in hell I'm posting my friends I failed. Okay. You got to use these things for you. Sometimes you got to use these tools, to push you. And then number 10, negative results for not achieving what's tied to duty. This is what I just shared with you about. If there's no negative results for you not achieving what you're doing, again, how easy is it going to be for you to quit? Real easy. See? So there's multiple factors here. There's conviction, self-actualization. There's the carrot, which is weak, to the pain motivation, to the guidelines, to the micro steps, to removing the negative feelings, to the visuals, to the repetition, to writing it down. This thing, but it becomes unbelievably powerful. I'm sharing with you, this will change your life. It changed my life. And not just from going 100 visits a week to 200 visits a week, not just from 100,000 to 200,000. It totally changed my life. You know, my whole quality of lifestyle changed that I never, ever would have dreamed. I'd have my own private plane, second house in Florida, retired age 33, travel to Europe and wherever I wanted to, whenever I wanted to, private limousine. Just, I could do whatever I want, whenever I wanted at 33. This is what did it. All these things coming together. It's unbelievably powerful. Matter of fact, I would have to teach your kid this. I'd ask for this video to show your kids and go, kids, this is your path to whatever you want in life. And start working on you and do them with your kids. Have them do their goals, you do your goals, and work with them simultaneously together. You talk about powerful. Training your kids, the mentality for your kids, holding you accountable. Oh my God, that'd be powerful. You got to tie it. We move away from pain toward pleasure. The higher the survival pain, the greater the motivation. Pleasure-based motivation alone is very weak. I would have never done any of that to have a private limo. There had to be way more involved. If it's not about survival or security category, there's a low likelihood of you attaining it. Match pleasure goals with primary pain-based motivators. What you want, what do you want to get away from? So a lot of times when I talk to clients, I go, they'll talk about the nice house for the nice house or the wife for the nice house. That's not how I'll refer to the bigger house. I'll refer to the house as you're getting out of crime, more drugs, more kids with an employee mentality, a give me, not take responsibility mentality. I said, that's what your kids are getting. That's what you're getting your kids away from. Getting away from the kids, the low achievers that'll bitch and complain the rest of their life. Get away from them. Get your kids away from them. See, that's a pain motivator, not a good house. Those are two different perspectives of why I'll go after the big house. So these are the 10 categories that will change your life. And the more you do them, you just get started with them. But these are the 10 steps. And I just shared with you a lot of personal examples with me, my friends, and maybe you can relate to a lot of these with yourself or maybe with your friends. But this is how you can totally change your destiny, even if you plateau. So let's say you're not chasing anything, you've plateaued. This is the structure right here. Take this structure, sit down, and just walk through the structure, apply it as much as you can. Create your short term, your 3 months, create your 1 year, create your 5 years, start putting the plans in place, reasons why you want it. Remember, all these things matter, and then start acting on them. Every day, there should be micro steps in your thought process, which are the actions you're taking. Every day, there should be another step that's going to take you to your projection, wherever it is. Otherwise, you just stay plateaued in their dreams. It's smoke and mirrors, and that's what 97% of the people do. They wish, they wish, they wish, and they never achieve it. That's the masses. And so this is the formula of changing that, taking control of your life, being proactive, and totally, unbelievably changing the quality of your lifestyle. I mean, the barriers that you have, and looking back, and I go, the barriers that I had, the psychological barriers that I had then versus now is night and day, because I allowed this to happen over time. And now there's no perceived limitations. There's nothing that I can't see I can do. It's just up to me. How bad do I want it? And I know the formula. Take the micro steps, hire the mentoring, Oh, see, I know exactly what to do to get from point A to point B. That's why I bought the sailboat and hired the mentor. That's why I bought the plane and got qualified for my pilot's license. It was little steps at a time that take you to the ultimate journey. And it's a hell of a journey in life. It's a, again, if you got kids, this is a fantastic journey to take with your kids. It's even better if you had a wife that was understanding and you were on the same journey, because it won't work. You go on one journey and they're on another journey, you're just headed toward divorce. So it can work tremendously for you and your quality of life and for your family and your kids. So I urge you to apply it as much as possible.